Welcome to the EduStar Talks podcast, where we invite some amazing educational rock stars who lives to inspire and loves to encourage. Hosted by an educator, facilitator, and the EdTech coach, Sumedha Sodhi. In this show, we will discuss about how educators can amplify student engagement, shake up learning, and can rock the curriculum content with 21st century skills. So if you are looking for ways to rock your class, stay tuned with us and be the never to be forgotten.
Hello everyone, this is Sumedha Sodhi, your host for episode number 13, and today we have Dr. Eileen Venokar with us as our Edu Rockstar to talk about a theme which has become the need of the hour, especially during the virtual learning. She is going to share her expertise today with us on a theme belonging before bloom. Hello, Dr. Eileen. We are excited to have you on the show.
Thank you, Sumeda. I am so excited to be here with you. Thank you for inviting me on.
Welcome to the Edu Rockstar Talks podcast, and we are so excited to have you today with us. How are you doing, and from where are you joining us?
I'm doing well today. It's a nice sunny day here in Buffalo, New York, where I am visiting my mother and family after all these months. Usually live in Kuwait, and I'm usually there, which is closer in your time to your time zone. But right now, yeah, I'm enjoying being in the United States.
Oh, thank you so much for sparing your precious time, even with being with your family. You have taken out your time to talk about us. That is really a great gesture for the educator community. Thank you so much, ma'am. Audience, Dr. Venukar has retired as the director of the Foundation Program Unit at Gulf University for Science and Technology. She is a blogger, she is an author, she is a podcaster, and much more. Dr. Venukar, I kindly request you to introduce yourself to our audience and share about the inspirational work that you are doing for the community.
Sure, I'm happy to share. I have lived in Kuwait, as I mentioned, since 1984. I moved there after meeting my husband while he was studying at the University of Buffalo. I have three children, all grown now and living in different parts of the world. And I fell into education by accident in 1996. I taught third grade for several years. Then I became the elementary principal at the same school, and then took some time off to complete my doctorate in educational leadership. And after I went back to work, I was an intensive English language teacher at the small private university. And then I became the director of the program. And as you told the listeners, I retired in 2019. I love blogging and podcasting, and hopefully, my book will be out this fall about the same topic we're talking about today, Sumeda, belonging.
Oh, wow, that's excellent. I'm waiting for that book to be launched.
Thank you.
And your ideas, I know I have heard you many times on various platforms, and every time listening to you and learning from you is a novel experience. You are full of learning and expertise and ideas. I'm really blessed to have you as my guest today, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Sumeda.
Okay, so dear audience, we always hear it all the time, Maslow before Bloom, or just now, like Venukar ma'am has mentioned, belonging before the bloom. And this idea, educators have to meet the student basic needs for safety and belonging before turning to challenging academic tasks. And I feel that in the virtual schooling environment and in the era of this ever changing assessments and curriculum, that's not as easy to do as it sounds. With the academic pressure on the teacher's head, it's very challenging for teachers to plan for the brain breaks or to check in with students regularly to make sure whether they are feeling okay. So that is why Venukar ma'am is here to apprise us with what does it mean because when we say Maslow before the bloom or belonging before the bloom. So, Dr. Vinukar, my first question to you is that kindly help our audience to understand these two theories. Please explain in brief what Maslow before Bloom or belonging before Bloom actually means.
Right. So Maslow's theory relates to um, human psychology. And when he was investigating and looking into this theory, he was looking at how humans react to the outside environment and also how they can reach a higher plateau, which he called self actualization, where people really, what we call, are in the flow. They feel so involved in what they're doing that they lose track of time and they lose track of what's going on around them. And so, as you mentioned, Sumeda, the theory begins with um, the idea of people feeling safe, feeling loved, and then it moves up to being able to be involved with other people. And so the theory really relates to how we feel inside and how that reflects on what we're doing on the outside, such as learning.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for apprising our audience about these two theories. Because once I learned this theory, Maslow before Bloom, when I heard this phrase for the first time, even I got confused. Because during my bachelor's in education, when I did it 13 to 14 years back, I heard about Bloom's taxonomy, but I never read about Maslow's taxonomy and Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So I felt that it is the need of the hour that every teacher or every educator should be aware about this theory. And as you have mentioned, that when we are able to combine these social, emotional, affective, and cognitive development together, we are able to create many, many more interconnections in the developing brain that enable the child to accelerate learning and development. So, what are your ideas on this, ma'am? Why do you think that belonging is important in education more than cognitive needs?
Well, and I'm glad you talked about the how they intertwine the Bloom's theory and Maslow's theory, which is slightly misinterpreted. I wrote an article, and as I wrote the article, I did some more research. The belief is that Maslow created a pyramid, but he never pictured the his theory as a pyramid. Um, all of these things, all of these needs interrelate, and so it's not so much that belonging or any of the needs is more important than the cognitive needs. It's that they relate to each other. In order to be able to learn, we have to have that prerequisite of feeling safe and feeling a sense of belonging. If we don't feel safe, we're not going to be willing to try and have possibility of failure. And so safety, feeling that sense of trust, that sense that somebody will catch you if you fall or fail, is really a prerequisite. So they're really interrelated. And I'm almost beginning to think that rather than belonging before Bloom or Maslow before Bloom, it should be alongside or beside Bloom, because really the cognitive and the affective, as you mentioned, Sameda, really go hand in hand. So it isn't one before the other. Plus, we know in our classrooms, as you said, teachers are extremely busy and there's so much going on and they have deadlines to meet. If we're not able to be able to combine Maslow or belonging and Bloom, the cognitive and the content, then there's not going to be time for anything. So we have to integrate the social emotional learning with the cognitive learning, with the content learning.
Yes, very rightly, ma'am. You have mentioned that we have to blend them and we have to bring a theory which is amalgamation of both. Because, especially in the remote learning during COVID-19 crisis, I think it took away the sense of belonging away from students. Students who once learned collaboratively in the classroom, they were all alone in their homes, learning by themselves. And all students are different. This I also feel that all students, some students were fine during the crisis, and some found way to connect with teachers, friends, family through social media, while others became completely isolated and lost their sense of belonging and connection, even to the school community. So, how do you think this sense of belonging to the community is important for the holistic development and the student achievement? What role does it play?
Right. As I mentioned before, the two go hand in hand. And even when we're online or outside the classroom, I think that it's important that we have created those relationships with students, and students have created the relationship with us and with each other, with their peers, in order to be able to continue having that relationship. So when I say the two go hand in hand, um, in order for students to achieve, they need to feel, their minds need to be clear. And so if, as they say, if you're in fight or flight mood, let's say something's going on at home, or something happened on the bus on the way to school, or you read about something in the newspaper and it's bothering you, and so it's going to be difficult. You're going to be distracted and your mind won't be clear to learn. So, the idea of creating those relationships, feeling that sense of safety and belonging when you walk through the door of that classroom, when you see your teacher, is very important because it sets the tone for how you're going to react to everything that happens during the day. So, for instance, let's say that you had a test the day before and you receive your marks the next day, and you're sitting in class, but you don't feel that sense of safety and belonging. The way you're going to interpret that grade is, could be, oh, that maybe you didn't do well, so that maybe the teacher doesn't like me, or the teacher doesn't understand that I was having a bad day, or I just wasn't able to think because something else was on my mind. But I can't talk to my teacher about it because I don't have that relationship with my teacher. So that obviously is going to affect how the student achieves in your class if that student doesn't feel comfortable. On the other hand, let's say a student gets a poor grade on a test, looks at it and says, "Oh, I want to do better the next time. I know if I talk to my teacher or if I talk to my peers, they'll help me review, or they'll help me figure out what I did wrong." Or let's say the teacher takes a few minutes before they go into the next lesson and says to the student, "Let's go over the test. And if anyone has any questions, or let's look at where most of the students seem to have the most difficulty, and let's review it. Let's see what we can do in order to overcome that the next time." So we get the stakes. They need to be able to feel they're in a safe environment, and to have those relationships already established with their teacher and with their peers, that if they make mistakes, it's not a problem, meaning that they won't be called out for it or pointed out or feel different. So, in order for them not to have this fight or flight feeling, they need to be able to walk into the classroom and know that they are in this safe space for learning. So, I'll give an example. Let's say that I took a test yesterday, and today I'm walking into the classroom and receiving the grade for that test. And I don't really feel that sense of belonging or safety. When I received the poor grade on my test, my initial reaction will probably be, "Oh, it's the teacher's fault," or, "Oh, I'm not doing very well, and so I'm never going to do well in this subject." Whereas if I felt that relationship and that sense of safety, and I received a poor grade on a test, I would be able to have that growth mindset and say to myself, "Wow, okay, I really did poorly on this test. Let me take a look at what I didn't do well, and let me ask questions, or let me find out from the teacher or from my peers how I can do better the next time, or how I could have answered those questions correctly. Or even for the teacher to stop before the next topic is approached or done and say, so I saw that a number of students missed certain question. Let's go over this and find out from each of you where it was that you went wrong, or let's just go over it one more time to review it to see what we missed. And then if you have any questions, you can ask. So the growth mindset rather than the fixed mindset, the sense of safety and belonging and achievement are all connected.
Yes, indeed, you rightly said, ma'am. And I also believe that belongingness is the human emotional need, which has to be accepted by the member of when the person is part of any group, whether it is family, friends, co workers, a religion, or something else. This growth mindset is very important that you have just mentioned. And people tend to have an inherent desire to belong and be an important part of something greater than themselves. And I have always heard you telling about self belonging. So, can you please apprise us that what is this idea of self belonging, and how important it is for one person?
For each of us to have a sense of self belonging is so important. And when I say self belonging, that includes all the things we talk about in terms of self esteem, self worth, self efficacy. Uh, we need to be able to feel that we are confident and we understand that we can learn, that we have that growth mindset, that we have the confidence to make mistakes, and know that when we fail or make mistakes, we learn from those mistakes. In order to have healthy relationships with others, we have to have that sense of self belonging. And although we're not born with a sense of self belonging, and for some of us, it takes many years to have that self confidence, self esteem, self efficacy. Once we are able to reach that, we can see right away that our relationships with others, our community, our peers, the people we work with, is so much healthier. We don't doubt when people say things to us whether they really mean it or not. We know that we can be our authentic selves, which is really important part of belonging, and we can be our authentic selves and also be accepted by others for being who we really are. And once we're able to be who we really are, we lose that frustration for trying to fit in, which means that we have to sort of fit ourselves into that round hole, even though we may have sort of square edges. So, self belonging, although we can't acquire it first, is really important in order to be able to feel a healthy belonging in any community that we would belong to with others.
Yes, very right, ma'am. You really created a very great thought here that self belonging is very, very important. And particularly, I think during this time of virtual learning, where the child is at home, we have to prioritize the Maslow or the belonging before Bloom, as you have mentioned, to create the foundation of Maslow before letting the stress of Bloom that takes over the child and damage what is most important to every one of us in our lives. And without family, without friends, without teachers, we will be unable to Maslow and find it more difficult to bloom, which our teachers are experiencing these days. So, what do you suggest? Kindly give us some suggestions that how educators and teachers can implement this principle or the theory of belonging before bloom into the teaching learning process.
Right. So it's really important for teachers to be able to establish those relationships. And being able to do that, whether you're online or in the classroom, is by meeting and greeting your students. And so I know that I have seen teachers who are we're all really busy and they're sitting at their desks or they're writing on the board. And unfortunately, they're missing the opportunity to greet their students. I would do that on a daily basis. Also, we're all going through an extremely traumatic experience over the past year and a half. So it's really important for all of us to realize that we're all having this trauma at different levels, but it's all a trauma. The fact that we're not able to hug, sometimes we're wearing masks, we're not able to see facial expressions. Um, this change in how we relate to each other, as you mentioned before, Sumeda. So, what we need to do is make more obvious how we are meeting, greeting, and also checking in with each other to make sure everyone is okay. So I know teachers who are able to do a check in with thumbs up, thumbs down, sort of thumbs to the middle, or a 1, 2, 3, where one is I'm not feeling so great today, two is I'm okay, and three is I'm feeling good today. And that gives the teacher right away an idea of what kind of day and what kind of mindset the student is having as they come into the classroom. So those are just little tips that you could do. There are many, many other activities that you can integrate into your curriculum also, which is all about the social emotional learning, which are things where that create that safe space. So, for instance, the beginning of the year, creating class norms with the students involved in what is respect, what do they want to see from each other, what do they want their classroom to look like. All of those things will help.
Yeah, thank you so much for telling those strategies to our audience today. I think if we all incorporate these strategies into our teaching learning process, definitely we will be able to provide that sense of belongingness to our students even during the COVID-19 period when the virtual schooling is running and teachers are sometimes do not have time or energy, but these strategies and ways that you have right now expressed and shared with all the audience, I think this is going to really combat those challenges. So, ma'am, I request you to share one last message, motivational message with our audience and inspire them to follow this path of belonging before bloom.
Yes. In my book, I have researched a lot, and Brene Brown, if you're not familiar with Brene Brown, she is a researcher and has been researching belonging, vulnerability, and all the topics that we're talking about for a long time. And she's one of my go to people. Quote from her is, and what I'd like to leave the message to your audience is, a deep sense of love and belonging is an irreducible need of all people. We are biologically, cognitively, physically, and spiritually wired to love, to be loved, and to belong. When those needs are not met, we don't function as we were meant to. We break, we fall apart, we numb, we ache, we hurt others, and we get sick. And so I think that really sums up why we need to make sure that within our classrooms, we all feel this sense of belonging because it's a natural need, as you mentioned earlier, Sumeda.
Oh, wow. What an excellent quote you have shared, ma'am. This is really a powerful message that you have given to our audience today. Thank you so much for sharing that. And please tell us that how our audience can connect with you and learn about the great and inspirational work you are doing so that they stay connected with you and they also get to know about the launch of this beautiful book that you are writing. We are all equally waiting for the launch of this book and to be learn more about your work and the ideas that you have inspired the education community. So how can our audience connect with
I'm
you?
active on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, mostly Twitter at Eileen Winokur. And I also have a website which with many resources about self-belonging, personal belonging, professional belonging, some of my webinars and links to my podcast and blog. and that's at journeys2 with the number 2 belonging, journeys2belonging.webstart.com.
Thank you so much, ma'am. So, dear audience, the crux of this session is that we need to put basic needs before we think of learning outcomes. Instead of fretting about whether children are being educated properly during the lockdown or the virtual learning, we need to care more about whether they are safe, well fed, well clothed, adequately protected from abuse, getting enough sunlight, fresh air, exercise, love, and attention. And today, Dr. Venukar has shared such beautiful ideas, thoughts, and expression and feelings of how we can make this possible even in the virtual learning environment. Thank you, Dr. Eileen, for coming and sharing your expertise with us today. We are highly humbled and grateful for this honor. You are truly an edu rock star, and we really appreciate all the good work you are doing for the community. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Sumedha. It was a pleasure and a joy to be on your show today.
You have just listened to the Edu Rockstar Talks podcast with your host Sumedha Sodhi. Subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform. Head over to subscribe, rate, and leave a review for us. It is very much appreciated. Do not forget to join us next week for another exciting episode. Thank you for listening to us, and be the never to be forgotten.